I think I was maybe in my 60s and started to have some medical issues or surgeries and started to get a little concerned that I looked at the end and looked at my husband and thought, I don't have children. Who's there for me? What am I going to do? And I talked to a lot of people, and I started to hear older people getting frightened.
Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, where our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in this program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Please discuss any changes to your treatment plan with your personal healthcare provider before implementing. Welcome to a special episode of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. I'm your host, Gary Scheiner. In today's podcast, we share clips of the Integrated Diabetes Services team's 3 favorite episodes from this past season. The first features our newest team member, Amy Sczepanski, who shared her deeply personal mental health journey with clinician Christy Piguayo. Next was the thoughtful exploration of the TRIO open-source looping system by our own Trynamic trio, Catherine, Dana, and Tavia. And top of the list is our youngest team member, Catherine Alvarez's deep conversation with Joanne Milo on what it's like to live with diabetes at an advanced age. We hope you enjoy these highlights and find them as meaningful as we did.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Integrated Diabetes Think Like a Pancreas podcast. I'm Christy Piguayo, and I'm with Amy Sczepanski. And Amy's here today to tell a really important part of her journey with diabetes that involves part of her mental health journey. Amy, maybe you would say it differently or better. Well, let me share a little bit. I'm a mental health professional who specializes in diabetes. Myself, I've lived with type 1 for over 25 years and love to delve into the lighthearted parts of diabetes and also the harder parts of life with diabetes that intersects with mental health a lot of times. So I heard Amy tell a little bit of her story and wanted to partner with her on this to be a support, not to her, but just to her and to other people that I've had the fortune to have them entrust their stories with me.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I've seen over probably the last 6 years is just everyone is dealing with something. And, some things are maybe a little easier to talk about than other things. Some things are very heavy and, like how would you bring it up or how would you talk about it? But I just have seen from my own journey how much I've benefited from other people telling me their stories. And I think ultimately that is where I'm coming from with this.
The listeners probably want to hear what happened and then also what did you learn about yourself and what you needed to learn through that and what did you need to keep in your life as sort of like a web of support?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a very conservative home. My dad was a pastor, and it's so difficult because it's like you grow up and there are so many good memories and there's so many good things. I look back, like the backpacking trips we did with our parents and the family barbecues and there's certain aspects that I'm like, I had a very good upbringing. My parents love me, and I know that. But then there was the side of that was you're very involved in the church and what the church is doing, and other people, not necessarily my parents, were speaking into my life as well. And I was in my early 30s. So I hit a point where I'm a full grown adult. I have a mind of my own, and I think I finally realized I wasn't using that and wasn't being able to think for myself. I was told what to think and how to believe. And I believed because the Bible said it or because this person brought, and I'm not saying any of those things are wrong. I have a very different view of it now, but that point in my life, I hadn't been in a relationship, hadn't dated. The church did courtship, so it was very old fashioned and very different from what any of my peers had grown up like. It was definitely a different experience to compared to people my age. And I think that was kind of the marking point. I met someone and ultimately started a relationship with this person and didn't tell anyone about it. It was under the scenes. And I think my breaking point is I knew what I was doing was wrong because I was lying, but then I also knew it was wrong that at 30, 31 years old that I couldn't just choose what I wanted to choose and not have people either judge me for it or tell me it was wrong. Whether or not the person I was with was someone that was good to be with, it was my choice.
Mhm.
And looking back now, and with the experience and the knowledge I have now, I wasn't making a good choice. Didn't really even have the tools to make that choice correctly. And I think now I know I would have chosen a different path. If I had known now what I know now, I don't think I would have chosen the road that I went down. But I did. And I really struggled because I was going against what I believed at the time. Months of kind of sneaking around and not telling people, and my whole friend group didn't know. And then what eventually happened is I lost my virginity, and that was kind of my breaking point of like, okay, this is okay. We're going to get married and this is going to be okay. Everything that's happening is going to get closed up in a little box and a bow's going to be tied on. And that wasn't the case. And at that point, I had lost a lot of weight. I was like not doing well, just mentally. I was juggling 2 different jobs and school events and meetings and church and all the different practices and music things. And I think one of the biggest things the church was to keep us busy, so we didn't have time, not even necessarily to get in trouble, but just like keep the young people busy. I hit a very low point. And then at that point, the person I was, in love with, that was my first love, he told me, like, this isn't going to work. I can't do this anymore. It's all this pressure of this, the secret relationship. And like, I'm done. I don't view you the same way that I did. I care about you. I will never love you the same way. And I think that was my turning point where I realized everything, put my eggs in a basket and I had nothing else. Like all my
You've
hope.
gone out on a limb to be in this relationship outside of the
Church.
structure that you'd grown up in. Now it was, and it was going to be okay if you put a bow on it and got married. But then I wonder if it started to feel like that was crumbling and,
Mhm.
yeah,
It was.
yeah.
It really was. Like I was not eating. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking. I just was doing all these very quiet things. So like people that knew me well knew something was wrong. My parents knew something was wrong. I'm high, I'm low. Like you can blame it on your diabetes. Like it was easy. It wasn't easy to cover things, but I did it in a way that I was like, I'm dealing with stuff. I'm just dealing with health stuff. I'm tired, and covered the fact that I was emotionally unhealthy, not doing well, struggling really for my life. I hit a point where I was just like, I'm so tired and I'm so done. Like I would pray like, Lord, let me go to sleep and let me not wake up. Like I was just tired. I didn't necessarily like want to kill myself or die, but I felt like I couldn't go on. And then in that time frame, that was probably early 2019. And I attempted suicide with insulin.
Mm.
Definitely, that was a very low point, and didn't tell anyone at first because my mom somehow has spider senses, and she came in and they didn't know what was going on. They just thought it was a low, and she treated me, and it was waking up the next morning was just really hard because it was like, damn it, that didn't work. Like that was my out.
Trio is like one of those diabetes applications. The rabbit hole is never ending. You can go dig as deep and dark as you want to in a positive way, but like it's just never ending.
Truly. Yeah. But I mean, it's absolutely incredible. How have you guys felt about using it? Because I feel like all of us used IAPS and kind of went back to loop. We used Trio, the original, and went back to loop. I used free APS-X, and I used Fax. I don't know if anyone else used that.
Well, who of this group is using Dynamic? Because I am using Dynamic, but not, what am I not using?
Or are you not using Sigmoid?
Sigmoid, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using Dynamic with Sigmoid and just with the ISF side of things, well, in the basal, but not the carb ratio.
Well, I think we've had a learning process. As you said, Catherine, we've all started out as loopers, coming from conventional pumping. We moved to looping. I mean, as of this coming October, I would be technically looping or using DIY for about 8 years. And then, knowing enough people, again, it's nice within the diabetes community being connected because you know enough people to say, I'm super comfortable with this, but look, these fancy features look like they would help the variables in my life for reasons, that are even more beneficial. So let's try this. And I think it's nice to have the hand holding too, because as we just said, it's nice to have a connection to say, well, I'm not the only one building this. If I have a question, I can reach out to this person. Or I think last summer was when we all started trying Trio, right? And in our texting Trynamic Trio group, we all started like complaining about similar things. Like, but like, this doesn't seem to be working. I'm going back to loop, or like, this is an issue. And so we could bounce ideas. But I think the reason we've all now stuck with Trio is because it has gotten to the development stage of, I want to say I trust it like I trusted loop. Where I ended with loop, I now have that trust and even more for Trio because of the pieces that have been built into it that are just more, they add to the variability management in life.
As my understanding of many of the different features and settings adjustments, how it influences what Trio does or doesn't do, I think that also builds confidence, because if you just look at it as there's this thing and there are so many options to adjust, and I don't like what my blood sugar is doing. If you never move past that stage, you haven't really given Trio the fair chance that it deserves. Right. And it's hard to go from one system to another. I don't care if it's a standard system to loop the first time, or one standard system to another, kind of out of the box system. You have to learn how those algorithms work to then adjust the right settings or expectations, as the case may be, in order to get the most from that system. And that's hard for us, right? Like, humans, we're creatures of stability and predictability, even though diabetes, of course, doesn't do that for us. So then forcing change on ourselves, we have to always stop and ask along the way, like, whose idea was this? Why am I doing this? Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point of when you move from one system, even if it's an open source like Loop, to Trio, you have to rethink all of your settings, because I think part of my frustration last summer was that I really did have to adjust things that worked perfectly on Loop, but absolutely did not work perfectly on Trio because the algorithm was different.
And from a standpoint of others coming into consideration of Trio, I'm really glad that I started Loop where I did, because I had come from a conventional pump that had no ability to navigate for me. I was the thinker of everything the pump was going to do for me. I put it in. And there's a learning phase to each of these algorithms and starting to use. And you make a great point, Dana, in that I went to Loop under the kind of assistance of somebody I'd worked with who was looping in pregnancy. And I was like, gosh, why am I not doing this? Clearly it does a phenomenal job beyond what I can do. And she helped me build eons ago, when it was like reading the hieroglyphics on the wall to build, right? And after 30 days, I was texting with, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm really frustrated. And she said, Jenny, you have to step back and you have to let Loop do what it's going to do.
Right.
And then you have to evaluate your data and see what to change. I was used to being the manipulator. I turned all my own dials.
Right.
And wasn't really I was like overstepping the system, which I still didn't really get the algorithm quite yet. But I think that's valuable to know when you move into an even more potentially aggressive, more dials to change like Trio has. My point being, I think there's a stepping stone plan of use. I don't typically suggest for somebody to go from MDI or even a normal pump system directly into Trio, because I think there's too much difference. As you said, there are a lot of settings that are not going to look the same.
Absolutely.
The first time I started, I saw the duration of insulin action. I was like, nah, and I adjusted.
Yeah, let me change that.
Yeah. And then it messed things up. So sticking with that hour action curve, the predictions are going to make a lot more sense. And it's just tracking the true duration of insulin action of the insulin that we're using.
Right. I had an issue with the bolus percentage because I could not get that in my head that I didn't want more insulin up front. And it does a really nice job of the default. It's 70%. And then you just kind of let the algorithm catch up on the flip side. And so I changed that a lot until I got settled on it.
I think there too is a mental flip of, especially coming from being a Loop user into Trio, the difference in how the systems see a food entry, right? And how they follow it, right? I mean, from a baseline of understanding, Trio follows food and ends up covering on hit of the food, whereas Loop ends up seeing a carb entry even here and now. Like you put the carbs in, it's starting to impact your blood sugar, whereas Trio has
a little bit more linear, I think, on Loop.
Yeah. And Trio really tries to keep up with that change and hitting it on need. And that was, again, an understanding difference in using one to the other system.
And for me, I have slower digestion, slower than what I had 10 years ago, let's say. So I can't just 100% bolus up front for most things, or I'll go low in the first hour or two. Now, if I were going to eat something with a really high GI all by itself, glycemic index, okay, yeah, pre-bolus needed, give me all the insulin, maybe a super bolus even. But for just normal foods that are a combination of fat and fiber and protein and carbohydrates of whatever variety, right? Then Trio gives me more options on how easy options, like where I don't have to break my brain to try to decide exactly what to do before eating. I can just say, this digests fast. I'm going to enter it as a normal bolus and take what it recommends. Or I know that this is going to digest a little slower for me, and I can hit the reduce bolus button that I already have programmed to give the percentage that I've tried out and adjusted over time. Then I'll start my food, enter the carbs, hit the reduce bolus. I get the smaller amount, and then it does a really great job of following it. I have a lot less post-meal lows and above and below target than I used to because of how the algorithm follows that food entry after settings have been adjusted. Not saying I never have out of target glucose levels. That would be also a fat lie, big, giant, non-truth, right? But I just think the system is able to help micromanage, and that lets me do my job and focus on life and my family and my clients a lot more without me in there like, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. I'm doing a lot less of that over the last few months for sure.
Word from our sponsor. Byram Healthcare understands that managing diabetes isn't one size fits all. With a full range of CGMs, insulin pumps, and diabetes supplies from top brands, Byram makes it easy to get what you need, hassle-free, shipped right to your door. And Byram's team of experts helps navigate insurance so you can focus on living your best life. Ready for better diabetes care? Visit byramhealthcare.com/podcast or call 866-692-8024 and select option 3. And now, back to our program.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about something that does not get nearly enough attention, and this is what it looks like to grow older with type 1 diabetes. My guest is Joanne Milo, who has lived with T1D for 60 years and just launched a brand new project called T1D to 100, which is a resource website for people aiming to thrive with type 1 diabetes in every decade of life. Joanne is also known for her long-running blog, The Savvy Diabetic, and helping to build the amazing Loop and Learn community. Joanne, welcome. It is so good to have you.
Thank you, Catherine. It's great to be here with you. It's always wonderful.
Yeah, you're just so incredible. So you're just one of my favorite people, and just so glad that diabetes brought me to you and to be able to get to know you because of this thing we have to deal with every day. Is there anything that really sparked your desire to create this website?
Yeah, it's the way I look at all of this is everybody's on a journey. We're born, we live our lives, and then we kind of know there's an end game, and then we die. I mean, it's just a reality. And if you're doing that with T1D, it's just that much more complicated. And I think I was maybe in my 60s and started to have some medical issues or surgeries, and started to get a little concerned that I looked at the end and looked at my husband and thought, I don't have children. Who's there for me? What am I going to do? And I talked to a lot of people, and I started to hear older people getting frightened. They're frightened of being alone. They're frightened of what's going to happen, who's going to take care of me. And I started to look at that and thought, there's no answer. Nobody's talking about this. I pulled a group of friends, long-term T1Ds, to my dining room table, and we sat around, about 10 of us, saying, what are the issues? What are we concerned about? What do we think we need help with? And came up with a list. I chatted with Bill Polanski and Paul Madden on a Zoom and said, I really think we need to pay attention to this. Bill said to me, well, what's the problem? You're living longer. Isn't that just wonderful? And the answer is yes, of course, we're very grateful. It's technology that's let us live longer. But the reality is nobody knows what to do with us. And no one knows how to comprehensively take care of us and make sure we are safe till end of life. And became real clear to Bill and to Paul, this is an issue and nobody's dealing with it. No one's looking at it. No one's setting up safeguards and systems that will work for us, and very little research. And so I thought, we need to do that. And we need to educate ourselves, because I've learned over 60 years, we have to advocate for ourselves. There aren't that many T1Ds total. There are more T2Ds, there are more people. We have to take care of ourselves first and foremost. And I'm used to advocating, and I'm used to being a loud voice and say, there's a problem here. So we met several times, and we made a list of things that we thought were major issues. I just started putting it together, saying, what do we do with this? How do we get attention? How do we get the research community lined up with us? And so I've connected very, very well with the research community. And then on a visit to my endo, on a day there were just issues, and he said, how are you doing? I said, I'm tired of this. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm tired of it. And he said, no, not you. And I said, yeah, I am struggling. And he said, I'm sorry to hear that. And then the appointment went on. It wasn't even addressed. Yet I was taking calls from people going, I'm scared. What do I do? And I thought, we need to address it. So that was the beginning of the decision that we need to get out information. It's knowledge that helps us plan and at least not get caught by surprise. Purely informational, share the information, connect to the research community, and then educate the caregivers who really don't know what to do with us. And as an aside, I think they'd rather not deal with us.
Yeah.
We're not as cute as 10-year-olds, and we have far more problems, complications, issues, comorbidities, and we are complicated. We take more time, and it piles up and gets worse. So it's like, how do we prepare for that future?
seems like so many providers just have thought of type 1 diabetes of this juvenile disease. And for so long, just it seems like they forget that people with type 1 diabetes get old. And oftentimes people with type 1 diabetes are diagnosed later in life. I mean, the amount of people I've met that weren't even diagnosed until they were in their 60s is truly, it's blown my mind. I never even realized until I started meeting so many people.
Well, I was diagnosed in 1965, and at that time, most of us were told we would not live past age 40. And I'm
Terrible.
71, so it, that number has gone by the wayside. But we weren't expected to be here. A lot of women were told not to have children because of the stress and the difficulties without the technology that just wasn't even thought of at the time. So we've got a lot of agers who are kinless. They have no next generation. Yeah, we are living longer. There are way more being diagnosed as adults. And actually, I think the statistics I recently heard through Break T1D, there are more adult T1Ds than children.
Yes.
So we've tipped the scales, and the over 60 crowd is a fast growing demographic. We're still here. But nothing is really prepared for us coming on in such large numbers.
If we grow old, we lose our family members, even if we have a plan and they're not willing to follow it. What are we going to do?
Parents whose kids they took care of the kids as type 1s, as children, and they needed to be taken care of. And then the kid goes to college. This parent with all this knowledge is kind of put out to pasture. Their knowledge is not being used. How do we use those people to provide support for an elderly person who can't quite remember how to put on a CGM?
Yeah.
And even sit there and step it through.
And even if these people weren't licensed providers, how can we get them to help? I see how that could make such a big difference because, of course, they know how to insert a CGM, and they would be excellent to join the team of these facilities.
Right. There's not enough, and there's certainly not enough allied professionals that we need more help. And with this demographic coming on so strong, it really needs attention because people will not get the support they need. And they'll end up in the hospital. And that's another burden of cost and burdening the system that doesn't have to happen.
Yeah. I wonder, did any ideas come out of ADCES of like what we could potentially do to better prepare like our hospitals and long-term care facilities and places like that?
Not yet. I think it's beginning. I was on a meeting last night with my team, and it was last night, and this morning I got an email from one member saying she spoke to another diabetes educator, and they're looking at how to provide that kind of care. So it's beginning, and it's going to come our community, and it's going to be to keep pushing the educators, saying, you have the skills that we're going to need. You can make money here. It's okay. You can get coverage, but we're going to need the help, and we're going to seriously need it. And people can do well on their devices for a long time, but a lot of people are going to need some support. And it gets bringing back to what are some of the issues. As you physically age, sometimes it's hard to open devices, and I've had difficulty opening CGM containers. Have arthritis, and how do we make those things easier? The other issue that came up, and I didn't understand it was an issue, but it is physical geography. Someone mentioned it in our early meetings, and so I don't know what you're talking about. We've been poking ourselves for 50, 60 years with needles and infusion sets, and we've been the CGMs, and our skin is damaged. Our skin gets thicker as we age. We lose the fatty layer. Where do we stick the devices? And so we came up with an amazing document called Skin in the Game, of all the community input of things they use that make it easier for your skin to handle all these devices. A local university and their Department of Dermatology, because the head of the department is a T1D, and it's just, how do we validate that this skin thing is a big thing? I'm running out of spaces. I've used that for so many years. So it's just shedding the light on that it's different now for us.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast is brought to you by Integrated Diabetes Services, where experience meets expertise, passion meets compassion, and diabetes care is personal because we live it too. Our team of clinicians, all living with type 1 diabetes, understands the challenges firsthand. We're here to help no matter where you are in the world. From glucose management to self-care strategies, the latest tech, sports and exercise, weight loss, type 1 pregnancy, and emotional well-being, we've got you covered. We offer consultations in English and Spanish via phone, video chat, email, and text. Want to learn more? Visit integrateddiabetes.com or email info@integrateddiabetes.com to schedule a consultation. On behalf of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Scheiner, wishing you a fantastic week ahead. And don't forget to think like a pancreas.